Did you know 78% of life's biggest turning points happen on completely ordinary days? Days people almost skipped. What if this Wednesday isn't just another day on your calendar? Something massive is shifting, and most people will walk right past it without even noticing. If you've been waiting for a sign, a breakthrough, or a moment that changes everything, you need to watch this. You may not have noticed it at first because the signs didn't arrive loudly or announce themselves with certainty. They came quietly, almost disguised as ordinary moments, yet something has been shifting. Think about the delays you've experienced recently, plans that should have worked but didn't, opportunities that seemed right yet somehow slipped away. At the time, it felt frustrating, confusing even, like life was resisting you for no clear reason. But what if that resistance wasn't rejection? What if it was redirection? Then there are the people, certain individuals slowly distancing themselves without conflict or explanation. Conversations becoming shorter, connections losing their intensity. Not because something went wrong, but because something reached its natural end, and deep down, you felt it. You've also gone through strange emotional waves, moments where you felt completely overwhelmed, followed by sudden calm, as if something inside you was being rearranged, with old thoughts resurfacing and memories you hadn't visited in years suddenly appearing in your mind. That's not random. And what about your awareness lately? The way you've started noticing things you used to ignore, patterns in people, energy shifts in conversations, a growing sense that not everything is as it seems. You've become more observant without even trying. Even your desires may have changed. Things you once chased don't feel as important anymore, while things you never considered before are now pulling your attention. And that kind of shift doesn't happen by accident. There's also been that subtle feeling, hard to explain, like something is approaching, not physically visible, not clearly defined, but present, an almost feeling, as if you're standing on the edge of something you can't yet see. And maybe the most important sign of all is how your patience has been tested. Situations where you had to wait longer than expected. Moments where reacting would have been easy, but you held back. Times where you were forced into stillness, and that stillness wasn't empty, it was preparation. Because when everything moves at once, you won't have time to question it. And here's what most people overlook. When a major shift is about to happen, life doesn't become louder. It becomes quieter, more subtle, more internal, more precise. And that's exactly where you are right now. Nothing you've experienced recently is random. Not the delays, not the distance, not the emotional shifts. They are all pointing in the same direction. You're being repositioned, not for something small, but for something that requires alignment at every level. And the reason it feels confusing is because you're in between two phases. The old one is ending, and the new one hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And that space in between, that's where the signs appear. Quiet, subtle, easy to dismiss, unless you're paying attention, and now you are. For a long time, it may have felt like things were simply not working in your favor, like no matter how much effort you put in, something always interrupted the outcome, something always delayed the result, something always stood in the way. And naturally, the question kept returning, why not before? Why didn't it happen when you were ready, when you were asking, when you were hoping? But what if the truth is this? What you called ready back then wasn't the same as what ready actually required. Because readiness isn't just about desire, it's about alignment. And alignment doesn't happen all at once. It happens in layers, quietly, over time, often without you realizing it. There were parts of you that still needed to be shaped, perspectives that needed to shift, attachments that needed to loosen their grip. Because if everything had happened earlier, you wouldn't have seen it clearly. You would have interpreted it through an older version of yourself, one that was still reacting, still seeking validation, still trying to force meaning where there was none. And that version of you would have misread the opportunity, or worse, mishandled it completely. There were also people in your life who could not come with you into what's next. Connections that were only meant for a season. Influences that would have disrupted what is now trying to form. And if things had unfolded back then, those same people might have interfered, consciously or unconsciously, shifting your direction in ways you wouldn't have noticed until it was too late. So the delay wasn't just about you, it was about your environment, your timing, the invisible coordination of everything around you. And then there's something deeper, your capacity. Not just what you can handle, but what you can sustain. Because receiving something significant too early doesn't elevate you, it overwhelms you. It creates pressure where there should be flow, confusion where there should be clarity, and what could have been a breakthrough becomes a burden. So instead of giving it to you prematurely, life slowed things down, stretched time, created pauses that felt unnecessary in the moment, but were essential in the process. You were being expanded, even when it felt like nothing was happening. Your patience was increasing. Your awareness was sharpening. Your ability to read situations was becoming more precise. And most importantly, your relationship with uncertainty was changing. You started to rely less on immediate answers and more on quiet understanding, less on control and more on observation. And that shift alone changes how you move, how you decide, how you receive. What didn't happen before couldn't have happened before, not in the way it's about to happen now. Because now there is less noise inside you, less urgency to prove something, less attachment to outcomes that don't align. You're not approaching things the same way anymore, and that difference may seem subtle, but it changes everything. Even the delays themselves were part of the preparation. They taught you how to wait without collapsing, how to move forward without certainty, how to remain steady when things don't make immediate sense. And those are not small lessons. Those are foundations. Without them, anything significant would feel unstable, temporary, fragile. So, when you look back, what seemed like missed opportunities were actually closed doors for a reason. What felt like setbacks were adjustments. What felt like silence was timing being recalibrated. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. It didn't happen before because it wasn't supposed to. And now the conditions are no longer the same. This Wednesday won't necessarily look dramatic from the outside. There may be no obvious signal, no clear announcement, no moment where everything suddenly pauses. But something will shift, and you will feel it before you fully understand it. It might begin in a way that seems almost insignificant, a small interaction, a message you didn't expect, a conversation that lasts a little longer than usual, or even a moment of silence where something suddenly becomes clear without explanation. And that's the detail most people miss. It won't arrive labeled as important. It won't introduce itself as the moment you've been waiting for. It will feel normal until it isn't. There's a strong possibility that what happens will not match your expectations, because what's aligned for you now goes beyond what you previously imagined. And when something exceeds your expectation, it doesn't always feel exciting at first. It feels unfamiliar. You may hesitate for a second, question it, or even almost overlook it, simply because it doesn't fit the picture you had in your mind. For some, it will come as an opportunity, something opening that was previously closed, a path becoming visible where there was nothing before, a door that doesn't just appear, but feels like it was always meant to be there. For others, it may come as clarity, a sudden understanding about a situation that has been confusing for a long time, as if all the scattered pieces finally organize themselves into something coherent. And then there are those who will experience it through connection, a person entering your space, or someone reappearing with a different energy, a different intention, a different role. But this time, the dynamic will not feel the same, because you are not the same, and what unfolds will reflect that shift. It could also arrive as a decision, one that feels unusually easy to make, not because it's simple, but because something inside you is no longer conflicted. The hesitation that used to slow you down won't be there in the same way. Instead, there will be a quiet certainty, a sense that you don't need to overthink this one. And in some cases, it may not be external at all. It may happen entirely within you, a release, a realization, a moment where something you've been holding on to finally dissolves, not through effort, but through understanding. And that internal shift will change how everything outside of you begins to respond. What matters most is this: it will feel different from your usual experiences, not louder, not more intense, but more precise, more intentional, as if the moment itself was designed to fit exactly where you are right now. There may also be a sense of timing that feels almost too perfect to ignore. Things aligning in a way that doesn't require force. Events unfolding without resistance. Movements happening without the usual struggle. And when that happens, it won't feel chaotic. It will feel smooth. But here's the key. This moment will require your awareness, because it won't stay open forever. It's not about pressure, it's about presence. Being able to recognize when something meaningful is happening, even if it doesn't look the way you expected. You won't need to chase it. You won't need to force it. But you will need to notice it. Because this Wednesday is not about something random happening, it's about something aligned, revealing itself. And when it does, it will be subtle at first, but undeniable once you see it. Preparation, in this case, is not about doing more. It's about doing differently. Because what's approaching doesn't respond to force, it responds to awareness. So the first thing you need to adjust is your pace. Slow down, not physically, but mentally. Notice how often you rush to interpret things, how quickly you try to assign meaning or jump to conclusions. This time, don't. Let things reveal themselves without interference, because clarity arrives faster when you're not trying to control it. At the same time, stay present in your environment, not distracted, not lost in thought, but observant. Pay attention to conversations, to timing, to small changes in behavior, both yours and others. What you're looking for won't be obvious, but it will be consistent. There will be a pattern, a subtle alignment that starts to repeat itself, and your role is simply to recognize it when it appears. Another important shift is your reaction. Not everything requires an immediate response, and this Wednesday especially, your ability to pause will matter more than your ability to act quickly. Give yourself space between what happens and how you respond to it. That space is where understanding forms, and without it, you risk reacting from old habits instead of responding from your current awareness. You also need to release the need for certainty. If you wait for complete clarity before moving, you might miss the moment entirely. What you'll receive may come with just enough understanding to take the next step, not the entire picture. And that's intentional. It's designed that way so you move with trust instead of hesitation. At a deeper level, check your internal state, not what you say you feel, but what you actually carry. Are you tense, expecting something to go wrong, or are you steady, open to what may come? Because your state will influence how you interpret the moment. The same opportunity can feel like a risk or a breakthrough, depending on how you receive it. There's also something very practical. Be available, not necessarily physically, but mentally and emotionally. If your attention is scattered, if you're consumed by distractions, you may overlook what's right in front of you. This doesn't mean isolating yourself, it means being intentional with your focus, choosing awareness over autopilot. And then there's trust, not blind belief, but quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need constant reassurance. You don't need to convince yourself that something is happening. You just need to remain open to the possibility that it is. That openness alone changes how you perceive everything. Avoid forcing outcomes. If something doesn't move, let it be. If something opens, explore it. The difference between forcing and allowing will be very clear if you pay attention. One feels heavy, the other feels natural. Finally, stay grounded. Don't let anticipation pull you too far into expectation. Stay connected to the present moment, because that's where this will unfold. Not in your imagination, not in what you think should happen, but in what is actually happening in real time. Because preparation in this moment is not about becoming someone new. It's about being fully aware of who you are now when it arrives. There's something important you need to understand. What's about to happen will not announce itself in a way that forces your attention. It won't interrupt your day, it won't demand to be noticed, and it won't come with a clear sign telling you, this is it. And that's exactly why so many people will miss it, because most are waiting for something obvious, something loud, something that feels undeniable from the very first second. But this won't be like that. It will be quiet, subtle, almost easy to dismiss, and if you're not paying attention, you could move right past it without realizing what just happened. Distractions will play a major role here. Small things pulling your focus away at the exact moment something meaningful is trying to reach you. A random interruption, an unnecessary concern, a shift in attention that seems harmless, but in reality, it creates just enough distance for you to overlook the moment entirely. And then there's doubt, that internal voice that questions what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're sensing. It might tell you that it's nothing, that you're overthinking, that it doesn't matter. And if you listen to it without awareness, you may ignore something that was meant for you. Timing will also be critical, because this won't wait. It's not something that will keep presenting itself over and over again in the same way. The window may be small, not in duration, but in clarity. You might only recognize it for a brief moment before it blends back into the ordinary. That's why presence matters more than anything. Not intensity, not effort, presence. Being there enough to notice when something feels different, even slightly. Because the difference won't be dramatic, it will be precise. There's also a tendency to hesitate when something doesn't feel familiar, to step back instead of leaning in, to delay instead of observing. And in this case, hesitation could cost you the understanding you need in that exact moment. This isn't about pressure, it's about awareness. You don't need to chase anything, you don't need to force anything, but you do need to stay alert to what's unfolding around you. Because the truth is simple. Many people will experience this Wednesday, but very few will recognize it. Not because it isn't real, but because they weren't paying attention when it mattered most. And the difference between missing it and recognizing it will come down to a single moment of awareness. Everything you've gone through up to this point is not disconnected. It may have felt scattered, random, even confusing at times, but there has been a direction underneath it all, a quiet structure forming behind events you couldn't fully explain in the moment. And now, you are closer to that structure revealing itself than you realize. There is a point where things stop feeling like separate experiences and start feeling like one continuous movement, where delays, shifts, endings, and uncertainties begin to look like pieces of the same process. And when that shift in perception happens, something inside you changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start sensing, "This is leading somewhere." That's where you are entering now. You may already feel it in small ways. A sense that something is close, even if you can't define what it is. A subtle awareness that your internal state is not the same as it was weeks ago. Less confusion in some areas, more clarity in others. Moments of unexpected calm where there used to be tension. Not everything has changed, but enough has changed that you can no longer ignore the shift. And what's important now is not to rush ahead of it, because what is aligned for you does not require you to force it into existence. It unfolds. It arrives in its own structure, in its own timing, and in a way that often feels simpler than expected once it finally becomes visible. There is a kind of quiet precision to what is forming, not chaotic, not overwhelming, but exact. And when something is this aligned, it doesn't need to announce itself loudly. It simply becomes clear when you are in front of it. You might find that your perception is already adjusting without effort. Things that once felt uncertain may begin to feel less heavy. Decisions that once felt complicated may begin to simplify themselves naturally. Not because everything is solved, but because you are seeing differently. And in that shift, there is a kind of readiness that develops. Not emotional excitement, but grounded awareness. A state where you are no longer waiting in the same way, because part of you already senses that something is moving closer. This is the space where alignment becomes noticeable, not as an event, but as a feeling, a quiet confirmation that you are not in the same place you were before, even if nothing external looks dramatically different yet. And that's why this moment matters, because when the next shift arrives, it will not be about understanding everything instantly. It will be about recognizing it without resistance, letting it be what it is, without trying to reshape it into something familiar. There is a difference between expecting something and being ready for it, and you are entering that readiness now. Not because everything is clear, but because you are no longer the same person who needed everything to be. If you've made it this far, it's not by accident, because messages like this don't just get consumed, they get felt differently depending on where you are internally right now. And sometimes the right moment is not about hearing something new, but recognizing something you already sensed quietly within you. This is one of those moments. Now, the real question is simple. Are you paying attention to what your life is